that phrase, taken from Moroni's final lines of testimony, written 1,000 years after Lehi's vision, is a dying man's testimony of the only true way.
Referring to Moroni's dying testimony is the second element. Holland tells his audience that a dying man would not lie because they will soon be with their Maker and be judged for that lie. This is an assumption and not a proven fact, especially when the person in question is a character in a book that may be fiction. To say that the Book of Mormon is the Word of God because a man in the book says that's the case is using circular reasoning.
May I refer to a modern last days testimony? When Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram started for Carthage to face what they knew would be an imminent martyrdom.
We now come to the third stage of Holland's rhetorical device, the notion of the truthfulness of the dying testimony of Joseph and Hiram Smith. He is attempting to establish that anything they said or did prior to their imminent martyrdom that they knew about could be considered their dying testimony and therefore true. However, there are some problems with this assumption. It is not clear that they thought that they were going to die. While it is true that Joseph reportedly said, "I am going like a lamb to the slaughter," there is ample evidence to suggest that Joseph did not expect to die at Carthage and tried to avoid his death. Here are just a few things to consider. Joseph removed his temple garments and told the others who were wearing them to do the same. Joseph, Hiram, and John Taylor were not wearing them when they were shot in the jail. Why would he do this if he were about to die for his testimony? Joseph had the original revelation on polygamy destroyed, presumably so that it could not be used against him in an upcoming trial. A copy did survive. Joseph had guns smuggled into Carthage jail for their protection. It makes you wonder, why would he prepare to defend himself if he knew he was going like a lamb to the slaughter? Hiram, Joseph, and others drank wine, smoked tobacco, while singing songs in an attempt to lift their spirits while they were in the Carthage jail. This was a violation of the word of wisdom that supposedly came directly to Joseph Smith from God. Why would they violate a directive from God if they were about to meet him and risk being judged for it? Joseph sent for the Nauvoo Legion to come to jail and free him. When the mob first arrived at the jail, apparently Joseph told his jailers, "Don't trouble yourselves, they have come to rescue me." He had made plans for and was expecting his rescue. When the mob attacked the jail, Joseph defended himself by firing his pistol down the stairwell. He shot 3 of the attackers, and 2 of whom later died as a result of the wounds. After he used up his gun, Joseph ran to the window and made the Masonic distress call, "O Lord my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" He was calling for help for any fellow Masons that were in the mob. So if he knew he was going to die and going like a lamb to the slaughter, why would he fend off his attackers and kill 2 of them in the process, and then try to call for help from those in the mob? And if he thought he was going to die all along, why didn't he just give himself up in an attempt to save the others? Joseph tried very hard not to die at Carthage jail. I don't think that his death was a foregone conclusion to him. Another evidence is that he did not name a successor. Because of that, many different sects of Mormonism cropped up after he died. Some claim James Strang was the rightful heir. Some claim Joseph Smith III was the rightful heir. Some claim Samuel Smith was the rightful heir, and some said it was Brigham Young. As a result of this, there are hundreds of Mormon sects.
Hiram read these words of comfort to the heart of his brother. "Thou hast been faithful. Wherefore thou shalt be made strong, even unto the sitting down in the place with which I have prepared in the mansions of my Father. And now I, Moroni, bid farewell until we shall meet before the judgment seat of Christ."
So how exactly does Hiram reading a couple of verses in the Book of Mormon to Joseph Smith several days before they were killed constitute a dying testimony? Even if Joseph thought they were about to die, we don't know anything about what Hiram thought was going to happen. All we know from the account is that he read a little bit in the Book of Mormon to give comfort and courage to Joseph before they stopped running and went back across the Mississippi River to Illinois and turned themselves in. As far as we know, this is the last time they read out of the Book of Mormon. and it was days before they died.
A few short verses from the 12th chapter of Ether in the Book of Mormon. Before closing the book, Hiram turned down the corner of the page from which he had read, marking it as part of the everlasting testimony for which these two brothers were about to die.
As previously mentioned, reading a short passage from a book several days before they were killed does not constitute a dying testimony that Holland is reaching for. It would. If they had declared it to be so, then you could say that. But there's no indication they ever did this. I mean, you could go and cherry pick anything they did in the last couple of days that you liked and make a claim that that thing was their dying testimony of whatever it was you want to proclaim. This is easy to do after the fact. And also, how does turning down the corner in a book constitute an everlasting testimony? In my library, I have lots of books that have corners turned down of them. There's usually a bookmark.
I hold in my hand that book, the very copy from which Hiram read, the same corner of the page turned down, still visible.
I think it's very interesting that Elder Holland would hold up what he claims to be the very copy that Hiram read from before they went to Carthage jail. This is because recently the Church News came out with an article that talked about this book. It had been found, and they published some beautiful pictures about this book and the page that had the corner held down. Apparently it was owned by Bathsheba W. Bigler, later Bathsheba Smith, who married George A. Smith, who had her name engraved on the front of this book. You can see the book here, you can see her name on there, and you can see how worn this old book is around the edges. So if we compare this picture that comes from the Church News with the one that's in the video accompanying Elder Holland's talk, we can see that the one in Elder Holland's talk looks much newer, less worn, and doesn't have her name on the front of the book. It's obviously not the same book. If we now look at the corner that's folded down, again, this is the picture from the Church News, we can see that there are 3 or 4 lines of text on the back of the fold. Also note that this book is being handled very carefully with a white cloth and very respectfully. If we compare that with the picture that we get in the video that's accompanying Elder Holland's text, we see that it doesn't quite look the same. You can see that there is more text on the back of the fold. Again, indicating that the picture provided by the Church News and the picture in this video accompanying Elder Holland's talk are not the same book. So let's zoom in on the book that Elder Holland held up in conference. It's possible that the video that they made is just used the prop book and not the actual one. So when we look at this book, we can see that the front of the book is facing Elder Holland's thumb, and that there is no text of any kind on the front of the book. Bathsheba's name is not there. The condition of the book also looks much better than the one in the pictures provided by the Church News. So it seems evident that the book that Elder Holland held up in his talk, that he proclaimed to be the very one that Hiram read from, is not the same book that the Church News said was the book that Hiram read from. Anyway, holding up what he claims to be the very book that Hiram read from is irrelevant. The use of this prop does not change the meaning or validity of his argument. It is just an attempt to manipulate the audience's emotions in order to make them think that his argument is more factual and reasonable than it really is.